Yapping with YUCCA podcast. Today, our guest is Breana. They do lots of amazing things, but I'm going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves.
I love yapping too. I was telling everyone, have a yappy new year instead of happy. Um, Hello, comrades. I'm Breana. Um, who am I? I'm a grief artist, first and foremost, a financial liberation coach. I think a lot about and care a lot about the body and movement and pleasure. I think mostly I'm showing up right now around resources and around grief.
Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, I can. Thank you for asking. Um, we had the opportunity to talk a little bit about my career, a little bit about the work that I've been doing professionally, and I think where I started, I kind of fell into this job where I was working assisting a prisoner rights attorney. And that attorney, I'm a settler to New Mexico. I'm from California originally. I'm from the Bay. And I worked with this attorney assisting and sending out retainers and doing filings and motions, all of this different stuff. It's like my first big kid job. And so much of my time was spent having conversations with Black and brown women, mothers and daughters, and wives, sisters, grandmothers, who were trying to get their money right so they could pay this attorney to help get their beloved, often like Black and brown men, out of carceral spaces. And I learned a hell of a lot through that job about talking to administrators in these like big scary systems in prisons, in courts. How do you have those conversations? Simple conversations. You need something from someone that's a part of these like cogs. And I left that job feeling really sad. And I think like so many hopeful and maybe naive humans, myself being, first on that list, I was like, I'm going to go to a nonprofit. And at that nonprofit, I will make a difference, because I saw people who, needed help. And that help was really predicated on dollars. And they didn't have dollars, or they were fighting every day to like, okay, I have $500 for you on this Thursday, and then next week I got you for another $400, like trying to get to this retainer amount so they could have legal representation. And in our country, like having an attorney who isn't sort of assigned to your case by the state, that can really change your chances of being able to be free. So, I took the beginning of the skills that I had, and I started to work with nonprofits and was burnt out and sad again. Like, just it's a common story. I think, especially for, I'm a Black trans person, but I was raised to be a good Black woman. And I know so many Black women who have found their way into corporate and nonprofit spaces and been burnt out and like wrung out. How much labor can we extract? And I continued to gather my skills in the nonprofit space. And, shout out to Casa Q, shout out to the Rape Crisis Center of Central New Mexico. There's something like so beautiful and heartbreaking about like working for the Rape Crisis Center. And I supported them as the Prison Rape Elimination Act specialist. So I was like working with survivors of sexual assault in carceral spaces. And this was during the second Obama administration. So I had this experience being in Albuquerque, being a Black person in Albuquerque, and there are very few of us. And then I would do all of this work to be let into the prisons so that I could talk to a survivor, um, or talk to, offer a workshop to correctional officers about what consent is, what um, what these humans' rights are within the carceral space. And one thing that like really, I didn't ask if I could curse or not.
About my what? Oh yeah, you can curse.
Say whatever I want. Um, yeah. So one thing that was really wild was realizing that some of these prisons were detention facilities, like where our immigrant neighbors were being held, and this is before, I don't know, it's 10 years ago, right? So there's just such a different context to immigration. And I just like slowly was radicalized, I think. And the final step was like move to Los Angeles, and I worked for a corporate nonprofit, and I saw the way that money moves through like celebrity and the affluent into nonprofits, and the ways that like money can be used to expunge somebody's reputation. You know, oh, you are being held accountable for assaulting someone. Well, let's get you in front of a group of Black kids, and we're talking about how you're, you know, supporting this after school program or doing right by your community, like all of this sort of social, the word that came to my mind is like social espionage. It's because there's this falsity, and also the money is changing hands, and the folks who are doing the care work, never see it. So,
What do you mean care work?
so that's that example that I'm thinking about is like, because I am a person who has strong administrative skills, I found myself in like financial departments. And if you ever want to like be sort of what's the word that I'm looking for? I guess really it's just make sure you treat whoever's doing your books really well. Because if you want to piss somebody off, what I noticed working for corporate nonprofits, and in particular finding myself in like accounts payable, accounts receivable, knowing how much people made, was like the people at the top were just soaking up all of the resources, and then the humans that were on the ground caring for folks on a daily basis doing direct service work were making, you know, I don't know, a 20th of what those in power were being compensated. And so I think throughout my career, I've just been slowly getting to know like about money, about equity, about labor and time. And I have a beloved mentor, Susan Raffo, and she talks about like these systems, the systems of capitalism, of racism, sexism, these big, those big systems, as systems of betrayal and social betrayal, systemic betrayal. And there's so much grief in that. There's so much shame. I think sometimes there can be this big cloud of shame, and you can't like really see it. Maybe it's more than just a cloud, it's like fog, and you can't make your way through. But then if you can, like, shout out to New Mexico, if you can have like a clear day, no precipitation, then what you're actually experiencing is this epic betrayal of systems. And I think after I worked at that, kind of big, very big budget nonprofit, I was disabled out of the workforce. And through disability, I really have received the honor and the beauty of being in solidarity with other chronically ill, other disabled baddies, and learning about a long history of disability justice. And also, like, how do we care for each other through grief? How do we live with and metabolize the betrayal that we're experiencing from our systems, no matter what intersections we live in, right? And I think right now we find ourselves in this moment where it's like we're seeing all these different ways that our beloveds, our comrades, our neighbors are being marginalized and attacked. And I feel really grateful that, like, that burnout that I experienced, like, kind of being a part of the nonprofit industrial complex, and then beginning to work with different experiments, right? Like, I'm not saying I've been in group settings where everybody has a fucking answer. I'm saying, like, people who are resolute and committed to experimentation, knowing that the path towards, like, I don't know, being together, being able to sit with each other is one of resistance and commitment and devotion and hope. And that is something that we just, I don't know, it makes me think about a wheel that's, like, not quite round. It's a little bit clunky, like da 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 da. But at least we can continue that forward motion together.
Hmm. How do we care for each other through the grief that you're talking about?
How do we care for each other through grief? I I had the opportunity to work with relationships evolving possibilities out of the Twin Cities for a couple of years, and that entity, that project talks about, like, moving at the speed of trust, talks about the power and the importance of building relationships and how that's what carries us forward. And when you ask that question, like, how do we care for each other, the first thing that came to my mind was rest. It's like kind of the first thing that's so loud to me. And my brain goes to, like, Trisha Hershey and, like, the the Nap Ministry. It makes me think about our beloved ancestor Harriet Tubman and, like, the importance of resting on the path towards revolution, on the path of resistance. I think what I've learned about grief, because I've experienced professional grief, and we all have the grief of, like, living during this time, but between 2014 and 2015, I lost, that's the wrong verb. People say, like, they lost someone. My mom wasn't, like, lost at sea. She died, you know, people die, and two other beloved people close to my heart died in quick succession. And it was, like, in that season that I learned so much about how grief changes time and changes the stakes. You know, there is seasons of my life, whether it was because of grief or because of disability or kind of the grief of disability, or, you know, I don't know how those words really, like, meet what I'm trying to say, but time became different. An hour could feel like a day or could feel like an instant. And in moments of deep grief, simple shit like brushing your teeth could be really the most that is the challenge that I can meet today, is just brushing my teeth. And I think sometimes there's this perspective around grief that it's a sort of, like, short term, like short lifespan. There's like a short lifespan to the grief. And I remember when my mom passed, the first 2 weeks after her death, people were like, "Oh my God, Breana, like, what do you need? What can I help you with? Do you need some food? Can I hold your hand? Can I show up?" And I wasn't a person, I was like barely functional. And by the time the shock wore off and a little bit of time passed, like about a month later, I was like, now I need help. Now I need somebody to come walk with me from my bedroom to the shower so that I can wash my body. I need somebody to like literally lure me out of the house to walk around the block. You have to lure, like, put treats down the fucking steps. Tell me that there's gonna be. I don't drink now, but like, tell me there's gonna be a shot waiting for me when I get back, like something. You better figure it out. But I think how we care for each other is through the attendance. And I don't have this fucking figured out at all, but one of the ways that I've reflected, like, I'm grateful that I made it to 37 this year. And there's something about, like, I'll sit with you while you cry. I'll sit with you while you cannot cry. I'll sit with you and you can tell me the same story again because you just, like, you have to make it through this story, and something's going to click when you share it for the seventh time, you know? I think that there's something really beautiful about encouraging each other to rest, being in attendance, and like shout out to my beloveds who like wish me a happy death day to my mother now 11 years after her passing, right? Like I have comrades in grief who show up, who send me poetry, who have a hot meal for me. Like humans are remarkably simple, you know? Like bringing a little bit of beauty, a little bit of distraction, something tasty that sticks to your ribs. Like that's, I think, mostly how we care for each other in grief, and not holding the expectation that anyone's going to be over anything, you know. I think I don't know, the algorithm is always trying to tell me stuff, you know. It's always trying to curate to me, so I'll get like a lot of grief memes or memes about like different facets of my healing journey, and sometimes I'm like, okay, shut up. But I often see like memes that are about like the grief doesn't get smaller but you get stronger kind of thing, and it's like I don't know if that's fucking true either. Like I don't know if I'm getting stronger, but I am habituated to carrying it, you know? And sometimes it makes me think about like if you hold a bag in your hand for too long and it like starts to get kind of raw in your fingers, and like it kind of becomes a bit of your hand because it's now sunken in. It's like sometimes the grief is like that. And then other times you have to like kind of pry it out of your hands and like put it in something else that's easier to carry. Maybe somebody else can help you carry it. They can take the other side so it's not quite so heavy. And maybe they can only help you till the end of the block. But I think that attendance is one way of like co-holding grief or caring for each other in moments of grief.
Yeah, I think when there is a loss of a life or of someone from your life, there's a narrative around like moving on, and all you can do is move on. But I mean, that's such a bypass of grief and of honoring whatever that connection was, and how you'll always probably feel that pain and have that love for that person. So my question is, how do we hold our grief and honor our grief on a daily basis, what does that look like?
I'm trying to figure that shit out too. I think one thing that has helped me that I've cultivated over the last maybe 6 or 7 years is an altar building practice. And I, for me, it has been really resourcing and beautiful to have a location that I can sit with in my home about the different griefs that I've experienced. And I like what you shared around, like, yeah, when somebody dies or when they're just not a part of your life anymore. And I think there's so many different versions of grief, right? There's the grief of a breakup. There's a grief when you end a job and the community that you're connected with at the job. There's the grief of like leaving a home, leaving a language, leaving, I'm not connected to the parent that raised me. And sometimes I'll have this taste for Gräbel, which is like a German donut. It's like deep fried and you put powdered sugar on top, but it's like a thing that I ate when I was a kid, and I don't know the last time I had one. But like there's the grief and like all the different ways that grief interacts like with the senses, with the body. There are so many ways that we experience loss and disconnection in life. I think the ways that I sit with that is, yes, building altars. And what I mean by that is, for my mother, and I have a photo of her, I have the shoes that I wore when I scattered her ashes that I have preserved, and they have like a little bit of her ashes like still on the shoes. I have candles, I have crystals. Sometimes I'll leave messages. Sometimes I'll burn letters. But I think altar building, altar making, and tending has been a way to make something beautiful of the ritual, and have a place to go. I think in other moments, and this still happens, but I hope this isn't what happens to my body, which is like people would have a grave site and you would go to the grave site and you would sit there and you could talk to them. But there's so many different ways that we can move our bodies towards a location to be with the grief, to talk to the human, the humans, the experiences that we are no longer connected to, and like the despair, the anger, the sweetness, the hope that we have in connection to that loss. I mean, I think some of the wildest pain I've ever experienced has been the end of a friendship, especially being like a homo, queer friendships hit different. And can be so romantic and beautiful and layered and deep. And what do you do when something so important to you ends? How devastating. And then where do you go with that love that's shaped specifically for that person? I sit with it. I dance with trees sometimes.
How do you dance with trees?
I like Hyder Park. I think Hyder Park has excellent trees.
I've climbed trees there.
Really?
Yes.
Well, you're better than me. I'm not climbing shit. But I do like move my body in front of them. sometimes I'll shake ass in front of them. Um, I'm really into headstands. But I think when we talk about like ancestral veneration or different ways to be connected to our guides or benevolent ancestors, like sometimes it can be very like serious. And, you know, like we pour libation. Well, and seriousness is great. Pour libations, put out some brown liquor. I'll put like an ancestor plate on my altar and like put the foods that they enjoyed and like the foods of my people. And sometimes I'm like, I don't know how to twerk because like it didn't come out of nowhere. Like that's in the blood. So like you can also shake your ass to move grief. You can also like move your body and be
Shake your body.
silly. You know, one of my favorite ways to move grief is laughter.
Mm.
I think humor is really important. And once, like, especially when something shitty happens, like, once you can get to the point where you can find what's silly about it, what's funny, like, that's golden, you know?
Wow.
I had a, I had a community practice called Dancing with Trees where I invite people to Hyder Park once a month. I did it for the whole year of 2022. And folks would get together and I would bring like bubbles, hula hoops, and like we'd have a little potluck and there'd be different like movement prompts. And I invited different artists from town to come help with it. But that was the whole hope of that was in part to encourage like brown and black folks in particular into outdoor spaces because I was a very in the house kind of cat, you know. I was either in the dance studio or I was in front of the television. Like those were the two options. And I think over the last 5, 10 years, one of the ways that I think I've been learning how to be with grief is in part like sharing it with the earth. And there are some things that are like heavy for me to carry, but you know, less like basically insignificant for the earth to hold.
Yeah. Wow. That's really powerful.
And you can ask for help, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I think with that, there's so much grief just around the earth, you know?
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, living through climate change and environmental destruction and just like cultural disconnection from the earth is so, like, is such an experience for me personally. Is there anything you'd like to say to that?
I've lived a lot of my life in urban spaces and suburban spaces, and I feel really grateful to live in New Mexico. And like, I live really close to the Rio, I live really close to the Bosque, so and like, even when I say that, I feel this like slight shame. I'm like, I should be in the trees more, you know, like, or maybe it's guilt. I never can remember the difference between shame and guilt. I'm
Guilt
like,
is like I did something bad. Shame is I am bad.
I guess it's guilt then. Thank you for putting me on. Whenever it's like this or that, you know, if I'm driving my car and it's like, oh, I'm going to a place I've been before, is it right or left? A 50%, 50/50, I'm like, fuck, I'm gonna choose the wrong one every time. Yeah, so the guilt of like not being in the trees and by the Rio every day. And I'm from a place where I've seen the climate, like the Bay Area, I've seen the climate change so dramatically over my lifetime. Like, I'll never forget, I was visiting a friend and I think it was 110 degrees in downtown San Francisco. And like 85 in San Francisco is kind of like, whoa, it's a hot day.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so hot that I could see, you know, those like heat lines um, in the city. And I, yeah, there's something, it like assaults the senses to see how devastatingly like humans, in particular colonization, has an imperialism and capitalism and this just like consumption has so taken from the earth. And there's this way that watching and participating and witnessing that extraction and also seeing how labor happens, at least in our society, and that extraction, it's like such a similar taste of grief to me, you know, like seeing your comrades become more and more burnt out and exhausted and not having like the care and support that they need, like that grief and the grief of the river running dry, you know, it's like tastes real similar.
Mm.
I had this experience where I was driving down like Paseo or something, and there was this little dog like running down the street, and I've never seen something like this where like all of the cars stopped. And at first I was like, why are all the cars stopping? Everyone's going like 45 or whatever it is on Paseo. I was like, what's happening? But it's because they'd seen this like little dog who was running down the street and people were trying to help it. And it was really beautiful to see all of these individuals inconvenience themselves, like take a moment because they cared about this animal. And I think that there's like being from urban and suburban spaces and seeing like how folks relate to our comrades who live rough, who like live on the streets, who live in encampments. I was like, what would be different if we imagined ourselves to be animals? Like we see this like dog and we're like, oh, we gotta help the dog. And it's like there's this like otherness to it, but there's also this like cuteness and this like commitment towards like caring for them. And like, you know, the SPCA always is funded. That's like any
Yeah.
animal humane, like they're not concerned. People are like making it
Oh
rain
yeah.
for the kitty cats and the puppies, you know, but
Yeah.
humans, it's like, fuck them. Like, I do not.
Yeah.
And I think there's like this disconnect from being an animal. I was like, what would change if we considered ourselves to be animals and like saw each other that way? I don't know. I've just been thinking about it a lot. But I was
Yeah.
like, we should be stopping our cars for a lot of different reasons, not just this very cute puppy who I hope made it to safety that day. But.
Totally. And I think that goes back to like the war on the body through Christianity and capitalism and colonialism and all of the ways that we're supposed to be disconnected from our bodies. And that translates to being disconnected from the earth and to the suffering of other people or people who aren't like us. Um, yeah, I think about that too. Um, there's so many expectations on like what we're supposed to do and how we're supposed to use our time that are so not like our human needs, our animal needs.
Yeah, I was talking to a mentor, and the three pillars of my work are around resources, grief, and pleasure. And sometimes I have a hard time. I can feel a little insecure about that, where I'm like sharing about my pleasure practices, whether it's like like one of the things I used to do is I used to teach twerk workshops here.
Whoa.
I used to teach at Black Widow Pole Arts. Shout out to Black Widow Pole Arts. Um, and I taught twerk, and twerk to me is also a really important way of like, because the pelvis is bowl shaped, and many things can get stuck in the bowl that is the pelvis. And one thing that I've experienced is grief, challenging emotions, things that we kind of want to hide in the body. Um, and those three pillars for me are sometimes a little uncomfortable to talk about, like maybe I'm talking about um, supporting folks with being able to care for their budget, being able to be in more right relationship with their labor. But sometimes I'm talking about like sex. And sex is a part for me of being human. It's not part of everyone's human experience. But I feel really grateful and proud to be of my bloodline, and that I have enough time to sleep at night, that I get to prioritize my own pleasure practices, that I can like enjoy my body, and like what's the point of figuring out the equation for how I like commodify my labor and how much time I need, and like, caring for my resources so that hopefully one day I cannot be working. They used to call it retirement. I'm like almost nervous to say that fucking word. But why do all of that if not to be able to experience my body and experience pleasure in so many ways? And yeah, I think what you were sharing around like the war on the body and the work to fully inhabit it. And so, like, even today before we got here, I was like, oh, I feel kind of swirly, like I'm looking at the internet. News ain't good, people are suffering. My beloveds are having a hard time. I talked to this friend, they're caring for a parent that's ailing. I'm talking to this friend, they're trying to figure out care systems for their family. Like, it's not a, and that's like interpersonal, not even societal. It's not even like our country. It's just folks like kind of suffering, and the humans that I know. And then I'm like, like get kind of caught in the brain. But there's something so beautiful about like finding ways to move the body and then like find your way back home over and over again, which is why I twerk, which is why I like, you know, go and dance with trees when I can remember, and try to let go of the guilt that I feel that I'm not like at 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 the trees at that yo at sunrise every day or something like that. It's like sometimes I get in my own way, but in my I'm a mindfulness practitioner, and I've been meditating with the Dharma homies for like 5 years now. They're virtual Sangha. Also, shout out to the Dharma homies. Shout out everyone. Um, but one of the things my teachers will talk about is like not judging yourself when you realize that you're in distraction, when you're in the thinking brain, and bringing it back to the present moment. And so I think coming back to the present moment is both like a tool of resistance, right? Like, how do you remain present in scary times, in activating times? And it's also a method of like attending to grief, like being in the present and being able to like view the beauty and view the sadness and the despair all at the same time, but like remember that you're here right now and not in the memory. And I can do that one of every 100 times. I'm aiming for two out of every. Maybe I can get one more rep in this year.
Going back to the war on the body, at this point, I feel like the people on the podcast know that I was raised Mormon. And I think the war on the body in those kinds of spaces is like so intense. And as I've grown up, I've gotten into dance, like you've spoken to. Um, Dance is a big part of my life now,
Mm.
since I moved to New Mexico, actually. Um, and it's so liberating, like having that opportunity to connect with the body. And I think what I'm hearing you say is that through practice, you develop um, the ability to inhabit the body.
Mm.
You have your meditation practice and connection to the earth, your altars. How do people become consistent with that, or how can people start to tap into what will lead them towards inhabiting the body fuller?
Mm. What kind of dance do you do?
I do bachata mostly.
Oh yeah. Um, I was into Zouk for a
Oh,
second.
I love Zouk.
Yeah, Zouk's sexy. Um, so when I was little, I just had a lot of energy, and I also liked to, like, they took me to dance class, and they like put you at the bar when you're like 2 or 3 years old. There's all these little girls there, and I would just like crack jokes to them, and I was like, I love it here. I have a captive audience. All these girls think I'm so funny. I'm gonna be a dancer, you know? And I was little, and that was like fine and cute, but as you get older, it's like more rigorous, and there's a lot of standards around the body and about how to dance, about seriousness, about how to hold yourself and compose yourself.
It's
Um,
about control, not
mm,
sensuality.
right, absolutely. And like your ability to override your like internal systems around like pain in
Exactly.
particular. And one of my teachers, because I have practiced pole at different parts of my life, and um, there's a dancer and teacher here named Irlanda, and she talks so much about like pole as a dance form where you really have to be present, especially because if you're doing inversions and like spinning, you have to be able to really stay within your body as a way to protect yourself, like so you don't hurt, be injured. Um, and I've learned a lot from like the sensual arts, and I think whether it's pole dancing or twerking or stripping, like all of these like ways that we engage with the body and play with sensuality require so much emotional regulation, so much yeah, I've been in circumstances where people are moving and they find like emotion that's like stored somewhere, you know, and then it comes up and it bubbles to the surface, and then you have to feel it. um I think consistency is a hard word for me because as like a person that's experienced chronic illness, as a person that's experienced disability, it's like consistency for me might mean that I take a month off because I have to rest. And consistency might mean that like this week I can, in the last year, I've learned how to run. And I ran like 2 half marathons this last year and 2 5Ks, and I feel really proud that I was able to do that. And in preparation for those runs, I sometimes had to take a whole month off because I got COVID, and like my lungs have to recover. And like if you go back too quickly and don't properly rest, then like 1 month of rest might be a year of rest. Um, so I'm not really certain about consistency, but maybe the best thing that has worked for me is beginning to work for me. I don't know shit about fuck, but is like consistent communication with myself and like building systems of self-knowledge. And I think especially with movement practices, it can be so easy to like get kind of caught up in something around like productivity or like being able to check it off of a list, or I don't know, something that's like quantifiable.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Linear progress.
yeah, absolutely. But I being able to sweat, being able to not be in my thinking brain for a little while, to like think with my body, especially like I love country line dancing, and there's a queer country line dancing group here called the Outlaws. Shout out to the Outlaws. Shout out to everyone. And it's so nice to get in a room with other folks and to do the same step over and over again and not think about it, you know?
Yeah.
And like bring my fan and be clacking, just clacking away. And I haven't been to country line dancing in a couple of months, but whenever I get in that room and I'm not thinking and I just get to move with my friends and my comrades and my neighbors for a little while, that feels, you know, it feels good. And maybe that's like the best I can hope for, is like continual communication with myself and pursuing pleasure. That is one thing that's hard for me to find balance within, is like I made a commitment to myself last year that I was going to celebrate as much as I grieve. I've yet to, the grief cup be overflowing, and the celebration I'm like, damn, it's only one little stone in there. I really got to get to it with the celebrations. But I appreciate like Adrienne Mary Brown's work around pleasure activism and how we have to make resistance and revolution and community building, we have to make it pleasurable. And that's why, you know, my grief practice is, although you know, I still need to up my celebration reps. Um, my work around grief is always to bring in humor, to bring in like silliness. I also, like, in the last year have been working on a clown practice. um, and that's been a fun way of transmuting, you know. I did a clown performance where I lost my butt and I found it. That was fun. It's like one of my clown teachers, Nikesha Breeze, was talking about how clowns can say things that like quote unquote humans can't, and how like clowns can be a really important part of activations and movement building, because they can bring forward the voice that otherwise might be too terrified to speak up.
I think we've really dove
We
really
dove.
deep. So maybe let's dial it in.
Like,
So
put it back in. Put it back in the box.
maybe people who are less familiar with the stuff that we're talking about, yeah, how would you define grief?
How would I define grief? I think grief is what's left after absence begins. And, you know, we were talking about all of the different forms of grief, like the grief after a breakup, grief after a death, grief that exists in like deep change and transition. But it's a feeling, it's a state, it's a sense of being, I think. And it's also kind of like a cluster of feelings. When I'm with grief, there's anger, there's sadness, there can be despair, so much so that it's like dark in front of the vision. There can be Disappointment. Sometimes it can be this like beautiful joy that something happened. I'm not going to be able to name any of these white men celebrities right now, but I was watching something with some ones at some point. It was an interview. I think it was Colbert, actually. And one of the Spider-Men, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Was talking about the loss of his mom. Andrew Garfield, that's what it is. And he said that like folks were like, oh, like, you know, I don't want to be indelicate. I'm not going to ask you about your mother. And he was like, please, please ask me about her. Please talk to me about her, because every opportunity to talk about this person that I love offers me a place to put this love that now has no place. And I think that grief is the other side of love. Like there are relationships that I'm no longer connected to that like I have to grieve for every day. And sometimes I'm like, fuck, you know, I want to do something else. Why is this grief still here? You know? And when I am most kind to myself, I'm like, well, I loved deeply and I cared deeply. Like I invested time and care and energy and devotion and prayer for this love. So now, in its absence, I have to grieve all of that love that I gave, all of the love that I received that now exists like in the void. And I don't know, I don't think that love is like a finite thing. I think it's very abundant. And also like the love that I cultivated, like I cooked it up for this person, like it's specific to them. I can't refashion it. I can make more. I can keep making love and offering it to my comrades and my friends and my neighbors. And but I have all of this that I made for you, and now I guess I just have to sit and look at it. Try not to get it stuck in my hips or something.
Yeah, we can only feel joy to the extent that we can grieve. Yeah. Yeah, I kind of grew up moving every 2 years, and I've always been a very, very sensitive person, very deeply feeling person. And those moves really were like the start of my grief and very much impact me to this day. And recently in the fall, I had my roommate pass away, and I feel like I was reinitiated into my grief that I've never had the tools for or been able to process. So it's like when one form of grief happens, you're connected to all these other forms. And yeah, sitting with grief is it's a process. It's not something I think most people are used to. But just kind of letting go of the idea that there's a deadline, that you should be over it, or yeah. I have a friend who was also friends with my roommate, and I feel like through that friendship, I'm able to kind of connect with that roommate again and um, just talk about her with that friend, and that has been really important for me.
Yeah, comrades in grief. I think I didn't have that when it was like big death, capital D, where I understood grief to be a something. But I know now as an adult that I was feeling grief from when I was so young. I just didn't have a word for it. And I'm so grateful now, like in my 30s, that I have so many beloveds who have experienced parent death. Like there's an Albuquerque Dead Parent Club. Like that's bonkers, you know. I'm so grateful that that exists. Um, and there's humans who have gone through like major friendship ruptures as I have, and as like, you know, I think kind of everyone experiences at some point in your life. And to be able to hold that tenderness with other folks is major, you know. I feel so much more capable of like facing my grief now than I did when my big introduction to it surfaced, because I was like 26 and I didn't know anybody who had a dead parent. No one. Well, I had one beloved. Um, but that was it, you know, and like people weren't talking about grief as socially as is. I don't know, maybe everybody's not experiencing that, but my homies talk about grief. I'm the person at the party that's like, oh, don't go by that person if you don't want to talk about death, you know, which is fine. But like people that I'm close to now, like are interested in it and find it beautiful, like as a part of life. We have to talk about death. All of the deaths, the big deaths, the little deaths.
So, how would you kind of tie the the string to all of these different things that we've talked about? The connection between like grief, pleasure, burnout in nonprofit spaces, organizing. What do all of these things? How do they all connect for you?
When I think about disability justice, part of the reason why I'm so grateful to be a part of the DJ lineage and to benefit from the work of um, disabled ancestors and elders and folks who are mobilizing right now is because disabled folks have done the work to imagine a future that leaves no one behind, that allows folks to have their needs met by the system and by community, um, in a way that moves forward to the next day, to the next experiment. And when I think about resources and labor and time, I'm always trying to figure out, like, how do you pimp the system? How do you find a way out of no way? How do you work with the systems towards our collective benefit until they fall? Inshallah, you know, like may they fall. Um, and so the work that I've been doing, both as an individual and in different projects and organizations, is always about like, how do we think about our resources, think about our time, think about our humans and their labor in a way that is moving towards collective sustainability and in alignment with our values. And our values being that like everybody deserves housing, everybody deserves a warm meal, everybody deserves for their like healthcare needs to be met, like basic human shit. And then the grief practices really come in because our systems are disappointing and our relationships can be fucking disappointing too, you know, like people are doing their best and they're traumatized, you know, myself included. And so sometimes our best kind of sucks. And so we feel the grief and the disappointment of our systems failing, of us like clumsily, messily, like trying to be close and intimate with each other. And then like big shit happens, like the LA fires, like deportations, like what was the hailstorm yesterday? You know, like shit just keeps happening. And so there's like all of the grief, and how do we sit with it and feel it and let it move so it doesn't trap our voice, so it doesn't knock us down. Um, and I think pleasure has been the daily practice of like the pleasure. Thankfully, I'm able to, today I'm not experiencing chronic illness, so I can go on a walk around the block and like maybe have my neighbor come with me, or shake my ass in my living room, or some way to move my body, or enjoy some food and like taste it and allow my senses to enjoy that nutrition and all of the beings and the bugs and the animals that conspired for me to be able to have that like taco. It's probably a taco, you know? Um, and so I think all of those things, when I think about like, my teachers and my ancestors and my guides, when I think about my comrades and like the communities that I'm a part of, like all of these different things, like transmuting grief, finding pleasure even on dark days, and like trying to figure out how to steward and care for resources. It's all just the makeup of life, and hopefully like a life worth living. I have like future elder tattooed on the back of my legs, and
Mm.
for a long time I didn't know if I wanted to live. Like it's really painful living.
It's hard.
It's incredibly
It's a hard thing to
uncomfortable
do.
being in this meat suit every day. I'm like, God damn, is there a feeling that I don't have? I have all the feelings. I gotta have to all of them every day, like forever. That's so overwhelming. Um, but I got to an age where I was like, oh shit, I might age. I'm doing it right now. So if that's the case, like what am I hoping for? And I think my like greatest guiding light is like maybe I can just age and die with dignity. And I think there's dignity in pleasure, there's dignity in grief, there's dignity in like having a place to call home and community that you care for and that cares for you, and enough food to eat and fresh water, like that. There's dignity in that. That's what I'm hoping for. That's what I pray for. It's what like cultivates all of those things. And like, I want to be able to be like Zukin when I'm 75,
Heck yeah.
Absolutely. Please. Please.
Yeah, you're also a financial liberation coach.
I am.
Um, and yeah, I think like our financial stability is kind of the foundation for us to be able to um, experience pleasure, unfortunately, in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
To not just be trying to survive on a basic level. And I think that's a lot of what can disconnect us from our pleasure is like the burnout, and actually like stress over time decreases our ability to feel pleasure. So I'm really seeing all the threads connecting personally. Um, but yeah, tell us about your financial liberation coaching practice.
I'm actually taking a certification course right now called The Trauma of Money.
Mm.
And it's been really beautiful to be able to sit in that coursework and like read the book, but I keep referring it to it as my textbook. And I've been doing financial liberation work for a long time, whether it's with individuals or organizations. And I think it can be as simple as like being able to create budgets. But I think what's actually most important is that financial systems in our society are really opaque. And I think sometimes when folks hear about money, their brain turns off. Um, and that's a class thing. You know, there's some
Mm.
individuals who are raised having conversation about financial products and financial systems.
Mm.
Some families that's normalized, and like I don't know, I went to a really odd university that we don't have time to talk about. But one of the humans that I graduated with, because I studied international business, one of those humans was gifted a hotel when they graduated. I like your face. I like your face about this. Yeah. Um,
That's offensive to me.
I love that. I'm offended. Yeah. Yes. We went to the Justin Bieber concert together, first tour.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
OG. Yeah. But there's some families where that's normal. And there's other families where, you know, I grew up in a mixed class background. So, like, there were, and I had three parents. I had one parent that was like a part of a union. I had another parent that like lived on benefits and experienced houselessness. And I had another parent that like was professional class and then was disabled out of the workforce and lived on disability until the disability was taken away and then had to completely downsize their life and reimagine their life. Um, and so class, I think, was kind of the last part of my radicalization, right? Because I was like, I understand that I'm Black, I understand that I'm queer, I understand that I was raised to be a woman, like, I understand all of these things. But then class, I was like, oh, this is why Dr. Angela Davis talks about how class solidarity is so important. And
Women, race, and class.
yeah, yes. And yeah, studying a little bit about her and learning how like she was always in solidarity with the Black Panthers and people um, really associate her with the Black Panthers. And at the time, the way that those groups were working, like you could only be like a member of one, and so she was in pursuit of communism first and foremost. And with that clarity, that class solidarity, so much more is possible. I think one of the things that I have like said to myself over and over again is like, I actually don't give a fuck what you call me or call my family or call my people. You know, like, can my grandfather just have health care? Can he be able to age and die comfortably? You know, like, I don't really, that's what would show me that Black Lives Matter is like if he had food in his fridge and he wasn't concerned about money, and if like our family hadn't lost like, you know, $2 million of property in a generation, like that's how I would know that our Black Lives Matter is through housing security.
Mm-hmm.
And so the the work that I do around financial liberation coaching is really coming from these stories and familiar experiences that I've had over a lifetime. And then finding myself in a school with like dignitaries' kids and diplomats' kids and like, you know, folks who had access to wealth that I could not imagine. And so slowly with time, I've been able to learn through my own debt recovery journey and um, through different teachers who I've been really honored to watch how they have learned how to wield these systems to their own benefit. That's how I've been able to be like, okay, I work with folks, primarily like Black and brown folks, primarily thems and thems towards getting clear on what their values are, what their labor capacity is. And I work with like a lot of artists and small business owners who are like, okay, I'm in a transition. I'm going to take the skills that I have and oftentimes like care for the grief and some of the shame that they feel. I think it's shame because it's the I am bad. Whenever I think about this for the rest of my life, I'll be like, Savannah said.
I'm so happy about that.
Savannah said. Um, record, save. Um, yeah, caring for the shame that comes up around not being able to use these systems to their benefit. And it makes me think of kind of like a small example. Like, I had a beloved grandmother who was passing away, and it was a long, slow degrade and passing. And my father was in charge of like caring for all of the bills that came through for her medical care, for the home, for the utilities, everything. Um, and the bills associated with like me and my sibling and his life. And it was really overwhelming for him. And I have a beloved in my life who sat with him and helped him go through the bills one by one, get clear like, how do we prioritize this? How do we say, okay, we have this much this month, we're going to pay these things, and then we're going to have conversations with the other bill collectors and see, is this next step in alignment with our values? Oh, it isn't? Okay, well, what are our contingency plans? And I think so much of financial liberation coaching is in that witnessing, in hearing people talk about what their values are and reflecting them back to them, interrupting the moments when like shame and guilt get all twisted up and kind of paralyze us, and then allow some of that through this like pure relationship, because it's not like I've been in major debt, I've made financial choices that I wouldn't make again, but I think sometimes it's like the knocks that really inform us and support us to be able to not make those choices again. um, so I think values aligned relationship building and really getting clear like what is enough for you. Some people are like, I want to own a home one day, and
Ambitious in today's market.
yeah. um and so if that's the dream, well, what does that look like? I think for me, I'm not so much I want to own a home, I'm like housing security, whatever that means.
Yeah.
um but getting clear on like not just today, what kind of quality of life you're interested in having, but also forecasting into the future, knowing that we all will become disabled and die, knowing that we all will experience life on life's terms. We will have spouses that pass, or like, you know, maybe you're a two-person household or a three-parent household, living our best non-monogamous lives. Multiple incomes can make things more possible, but then what if one of our beloveds has a disabling event? Then how do we shift, and how do we allow our dollars to work as tools towards our individual and collective benefit? So that's the work. Find the values, get clear on where your resources are right now and what direction you want to move in, and then having like righteous conversations. I love calling a bill collector and saying no. Like, I love being like, oh, this person owes like $3,000 in debt. We'll give you 300. And I've had the experience in the past where I've settled debt for a fraction of what I've owed. And the difference, I think, between like growing up working class and growing up with wealth, or somewhere in between, or like a complex dynamic of those things, is like believing that you can respond, that you can barter with not just individuals when you're at the farmer's market or like when you're at a flea market and you're like, I want that watch, but I only got $10, but also with these major organizations and figuring out how you can do that so that your credit can recover, so that you can build up your credit and be able to go into a bank and show a portfolio and they're like, oh, okay, we want to offer you a loan. Um, I think having support so that you feel encouraged to be able to have those conversations, that's like one aspect of financial liberation coaching for me. Like, I've gotten the opportunity to be on calls with the IRS, be on calls with student loan organizations, and just be like, okay, like, thank you for answering that question. I need more insight. What's your name? What's your badge number? If we need to call you back, who, even just having someone with you. I think body doubling is such a big, you know, phrase right now. Everybody's like, I need a body double. And we need a body double for these moments of challenge also, right? Like, there's so much that we're expected to do by ourselves. And doing it by ourselves is this like credo that we are an adult, but like, who when we look at societies that we admire, that we would like to be a part of and that we want to venerate, was eating alone every day, was like doing hard things alone, like burying your dead, like having a baby, like all of the beautiful parts of life, all of the challenging and tragic, all of the crisis, when the flood comes, when it's raining so much, we huddle together. And so I think financial liberation coaching, and I also think about like capitalism, harm reduction, like how do we reduce the harm of these systems, is about doing it together and using our shared resources and skills to be able to navigate these systems to our individual and collective benefit.
Yeah, and I think people can have a lot of shame in claiming the quality of life that they want to live, like going to the river every day,
Yes.
that's an unconventional ambition to have, because we're supposed to be hustling if we're young so we can, eventually be able to have these luxuries, but like why put them to the side now? And yeah, that's definitely a journey I've been on, is like cutting back and like what do I really need to live, and um how do I protect my rest and my pleasure while also caring for my basic needs in a way that feels good.
Yeah. And I think that there can be shame and guilt, both of them, around our basic needs being met, because so many of our comrades are experiencing the suffering of not having housing, food, water, community, a combination of those things. And it's like, I don't know, it's also interesting to find myself in a moment where like I make a livable wage, I like where I live, I'm well cared for, and I have like a therapist that I like, and I can get body work when I need it. Like all of these things, I'm so grateful, so grateful for those blessings, and that should be a right. And then how do I enjoy that, not feel ashamed for the fact that I have those needs met, and amplify so that more, so that like, my candle being lit, I can light other people's candles as well. I think sometimes, like, I have a homie, I was like, we could go out to lunch, and we had a really nice lunch, and we could pay for it. I was like, we're rich. This is rich. This is like maximum rich to me. And I remember being like in my first year of college, and I was living in New York, and I just like, getting money to get on the train was hard, let alone like taking good care of myself. And I was always tired, and I was always hungry, and I was always cold. And then being able to go back now, like 20 years later, and be like, if I need to go to the bodega and to get like an egg and cheese, I can do it. You know, if I need to take a cab because I'm like having a pain day and I need to get home, I can do that. And I'm so, like, I can't say how grateful I am enough. And also, I've noticed like having your needs met when our comrades' needs aren't met, it can be really challenging in social circles where it's like we're all clear that like being a billionaire is bad, you know, but there can be like infighting when with folks who have like just enough and folks who don't have enough. So how do we like shift this paradigm so that like all of this excess can make it so that we have housing security, so that like folks, there's enough food. Can that food be offered to the humans that are hungry so that we can have fresh water? Like how do we do that labor of redistribution?
Yeah, I'm curious. You were raised to be a woman. Um, how do you identify now?
My brain just says so many different things. My brain was like alien.
All of the
My
above.
brain was like non-binary. Um, I think my second language is French, or my second like spoken language is French because I sometimes think about dance being my first language. And in French, transgender is like transgenre, which is basically the same thing, but like genre is the second part.
Oh, I like that.
And that makes a lot of sense to me. I have always experienced life in some sort of like in between state. Like, I've always been like clearly a person of color. Although I feel like when I was a younger human, people were unclear what type of person of color I was, especially in the community I was a part of. People were like, are you South Asian? Are you, like different understandings of my blackness? And but I was raised by a white woman. And by an older and disabled white woman. And so my experience of growing up was like always this third thing, this fourth thing. And then I started college in the US, but I finished it abroad. And so I was like an American living in Paris and like a part of the school where people had so much wealth, but I didn't have wealth. And so there's like this outsiderness over and over again. And so I think non-binary as a term is like pretty weak. It doesn't mean a lot to me, but I do live a life that exists outside of the binary. And I don't know, it's so cute because for a long time I felt like this queer person who was pretty feminine presenting and like perceived to be straight because I was in this like long-term relationship with this white cis dude. And then I moved here, and Albuquerque is full of queer folks and trans folks. And we have one of the first transgender research centers in the country. And so I was able to access hormones and multiple medical practitioners who were able to help me on a sort of like gender affirming care journey. And I had top surgery 18 months ago and longer than that. And I've been on dermal T for a while, and always with the hope of like moving towards something more vague, something more in the void. And it's annoying to, if somebody asks you a question, to kind of like answer the question with questions, or like this is what it isn't. But I think that still remains what's most easeful for me. And like there's all of these ways that I've been able to say, like, this is what I'm not. Like, I'm not a woman, but I'll always be a black woman. But I do think that being a black woman is about class as much as it's about gender. And I also have experienced like gender affirming care, and that has like changed my sex. You know, it's changed my corpus. Um, so I think Alien. I think like a secret third option. I think like all of the answers and none of the answers. Like I know some folks who are interested in this as interested in passing as men. I have no interest in that. I like all respect to the trans folks who are on that journey. But I'm like, why would I ever want that? Like that's like such a no for me.
Yeah.
Um and I think sometimes I'll get surd out and about. And that always hits much better than ma'am.
Okay.
But I prefer comrade, you know. But when AT&T calls, they're never like, hello, comrade. Like, maybe in the future. Here's hoping.
Yeah, that's great. I think I'm trying to formulate a question. Um, I think I want to know, like, being raised to be a woman and kind of like disowning that. Um, I'm curious what that journey was like. I think that's my question. And I guess like just coming into your authentic self and how you feel yourself to be and how that um, might connect to like grief or loss or labor.
Yeah. I think the girl was beat out of me. And I think my experience of my gender and my sexuality has really been about finding, returning to the self that I was like so clearly at like 6 years old, 7 years old, 14. Like, I grew up in a really queer community. It wasn't like perfect. Um, People were still like shitty. Um, but my first girlfriend, Shannon Mateski, an amazing poet and writer, hey Shay, was the president of our class, our freshman class, and they would call me the first lady because we were dating. Um, so like before Obama, Shannon was the black president, you know.
Oh my gosh.
So I at a really young age had the opportunity to like be myself, even though it was uncomfortable and, you know, not supported at 100%. I lived in the United States. I was still here, you know, but there was some ways that I was safeguarded within artistic community and black community and in this like little bubble. And there's been many times in my life where I've shifted and changed like how I dress and what my hair is like, and then watched how humans related to me. And when I was a little one, I was like so bullied and so awkward and weird, and so neurodivergent, and we did not know how to say any of that, you know. And so there was this moment in my life where I was like, if I'm going to survive, I got to figure something out. And what I figured out was I'm going to be a hot girl, because hot girls have the currency that they need to survive. So I figured that out. I figured out how to be a hot black girl. And it was very like just telling on myself. It's very, a weaponized femininity. Like, I'll fuck you and your boyfriend too. Like very the the currency that I had was like my hotness and my ability to like wield it in different situations to get what I wanted.
Mm.
It was really painful for me, for everyone around me, and the feminine as a weapon, I think, is a very important tool that I like got to know and then put down.
Mm.
And so I'd have these moments where I would like dress more like Daiki or like a stud, or like there was this model named Omahira that I thought was like the hottest thing. And they were like very what's that word? It's not ambidextrous. I think we're almost there. It's like not masculine, not feminine. It's like androgynous. Oh, that would have haunted me. I
I
would have
feel
been a
like all
driving
three of
lady.
those could kind of
Yeah,
work.
we were there. Um, but they really played with androgyny. And so then I was like, I pivoted that way and then noticed the way that like my social currency changed. And I was like, I don't like this. I don't like this. And then like kind of pivoted deeply back. And it was really like in the last 5 years, like coming back to Albuquerque because I lived here before and now I live here again. It's like the third time. The land of enchantment will really be like, we want you here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm trying to leave. They're like, no,
Oh yeah.
I don't think that is gonna happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's been over the last 5 years, like people know me for being trans, or like I wrote a guide, a top surgery guide on like how I created the care team and the support that I needed through the process of like getting top surgery and recovering. And so it's wild to now be known for being trans, for being able to steward the resources that we have in this state towards my own benefit and like caring for other beloveds so that they can do it too. But they're like, I think about disabled folks and chronically ill folks as humans to look towards for leadership on how to survive. And I also think about trans folks as excellent leaders and voices to turn towards in these moments of deep uncertainty. Because when I decided that I was going to go through a top surgery, I was like, okay, I am accepting that I'm going to surrender my body to the medical industrial complex, to these practitioners where, you know, Black mamas have such more devastating results trying to get basic health care while they're going through like, pregnancy and giving birth. Like, I am letting this like Black body be changed by these individuals. And a surgeon in particular, like that's wild. That's a wild
Yeah.
fucking thing.
Yeah.
But going through medical transition, which is not the only way to be trans, but it is something that I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to have. Um, it meant that I was willing to die for what was right for me. I was willing to be like put down and then resurrected like Jesus, like I believe so deeply that that will improve my quality of life, change what it's like to literally exist. And it did. I would do it again today. And being trans at this time, being Black and trans, which is a very particular thing, there's so much in there about the reclamation of the body, about pleasure as a birthright, about navigating resources, like having top surgery. It's the longest amount of time I've ever taken off work. And I only had to sacrifice, 5 pounds of flesh to get a month off. I think it made me think so much about systems of care because I wasn't able to use my body in the same way that I was used to, and I'd rely on people that I loved and who loved me and who pissed me off and who I pissed off
Mm.
to help me make food, help me wipe my ass, like real human care. And before I had top surgery, like maybe a year before I began the process, I knew this other trans person who came from more financial privilege, and we were in a group together, and I had this moment where I got so mad. I was like, you get to have this and I might never get to have this. How am I going to get the money together to like make this happen for myself? And I was so angry. And I think anger is a part of grief. I had to like feel that feeling
Yeah.
and realize, just the same as I was talking about, like, here I am in 2026, my basic needs are met. And sometimes there's these moments where either I feel like a constriction about having resources, or I can feel it in my beloved that it like feels uncomfortable. I just sit with this person who had access to top surgery, who had access to parents that would care for them through the process and who would pay for it.
Wow.
I was like, when my mother died, she left a bill. What do I'm so mad. Why do you get to have a thing? But it's not about them. Like, they were the person, the opportunity for me to express this anger and this sadness and like imperfectly do it. And thankfully, we had help for me to be like, oh, okay, it's not about you. I'm glad you had top surgery. Can I have some fucking top surgery?
Mm-hmm.
I also want this. Um, yeah, being trans and being able to receive the gender affirming care that I am honored to have received touches on all of those things. The grief, the days before surgery, I was like, I know I'm not a human that wants to carry a child in my body and doesn't want to chest feed. And also, I was like, this means that I won't with certainty. I like, I got top surgery where I don't have nipples. Like, there's going to be no nutrients coming out of this chest. You can lay on it,
Oh.
but but I cannot feed another human from this body, and like the grief of making that choice, and also the sacrifice meant something to me. The sacrifice of the flesh, this the allowing myself to be scarred for life,
Mm.
and wearing it proudly. Yeah, I remember, again, only vague details. Everything just gets integrated into the mass of brain. But I remember listening to a podcast about like basically down to the family, like end the family,
Mm.
and how post enslavement in the United States, there was this season where folks who had been formerly enslaved would sort of collectivize in, I think, what we now would think of as sort of like this queer family unit. And, adults and kids, partners, like people would just live together. And through capitalism and through like sharecropping and saying, like, okay, you're going to care for this parcel of land, and there has to be one man and one woman who's doing it, in the way that Christianity really shaped that formation, destructed this like natural way of organizing and sharing care and labor and time and love. Um, Head down to the family. End
Yeah.
it.
The General Allotment Act, I believe what it did was kind of break apart Indigenous kinship systems here in the so called US. And um, a man would get land if he was married and had kids, and would get more land if he had more children. And um, that kind of shapes how we understand property today. Um, but yeah, and I think like the protection of the family and the kind of like obsession with the family from the right of course, comes from that profit motive and all the things.
Yeah. When I when I found myself the first time I moved to New Mexico, I sort of like stumbled into a family that was Christian fundamentalist and was like kind of releasing that. And I'm now realizing that I don't know if I would have come out as trans if not for being so connected to that ideology, even for a short period of time. And I have a chosen baby. Their name is Ezra. And they're like grown, they're 25 years old. But I remember they came out to me as non binary. And I was like, oh, so you're a T girl, like you're a trans woman. And they were like, no, non binary. And I was like, well, are you going to go on estrogen? And like, I don't know, I imagined myself to be being supportive, but was still really playing within the binary, you know? And I was like, well, okay, pause, I'm going to read a book. I'm going to learn some more and come back. And then was able to understand, their transition verbally, socially, really encouraged me to re-understand myself, allow myself more space, more license for my own transness, that it should exist outside of the binary. And that little one that I have a relationship with is from that family. And we had both, they grew up in it, but I had found my way into it via like partnership and then marriage. And so, yeah, cults, whatever, who has the time to fully dive into that? But like, I do think that there is this like beauty in the work that I've done, noticing how much friction and tension there was for me around like the role of a woman, the role of a mother, the role of a wife, like to be open and available for sex for your like husband partner indefinitely, that your pleasure is always not even second priority. I don't even know where it would be on the list. It's like not even on the list. That like your ability to care and to pour out and to pour into the other, pour into children, pull into your elders, pour into your spouse, like that, until you are empty, that is the only way that you can know your sense of belonging and value is from this like emptiness.
Yeah, self-sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Self-betrayal. And I think, again, like that burnout, that like exhaustion, whether it's through like labor systems, familiar systems, like the burnout of the earth, it was like in that place of being so tired that I was like, there has to be another option. It doesn't feel good, it doesn't smell good, it doesn't look good, it doesn't taste good. Like all of my senses hate this. But yeah, if it doesn't look good, doesn't smell good, doesn't feel good, wakes you up in the night.
Yeah, well, I applaud you for taking the risk in this society to be authentic and do what feels good and tastes good and smells good and sounds good.
Same, right? You're doing the same thing.
Thank you. I think that might be a good note to end on.
Done yapping.
We have yapped.
We have, most definitely. Yeah.
How can listeners support you and plug into what you're up to?
You can find me on Instagram. My Instagram is Signs of Breana. Breana is spelled Breana. And I am going to be taking on some new financial liberation coaching clients later this winter. So that's one offering that I'll be sharing. I also have been collaborating with Una Shape, which is a grief sanctuary in Abiquiu. We were able to collaborate in the summer of 2025. We did something called Grief Prom together, which was really cool. It's all like a celebration and grief cafe around queer grief. But I'll be doing another grief cafe later this month. And I'm a writer. You can read my Substack. All my musings about community and lack thereof, about how I used to have a deep relationship with cigarettes and then we broke up and it's sad still. Different shit.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I have a podcast.
Oh.
I almost forgot. It's also called Signs of Breana, and wherever you listen to podcasts, you can hear my podcasts. And it's been so nice to be your guest.
Thank you. You guys can plug into YUCCA on Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We'll have everything linked in the description. But thank you so much for coming on, Breana. I have really enjoyed this time talking to you. And I hope our listeners can listen to more of you and read more of you and see more of you.
Hell yeah. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Hold up, shut it down. Don't hold on to what is now. Don't fall through, cut it out. Rebel music, bump it now.